This is Between the Brackets, a Mediawiki podcast, episode 17, September 18th, 2018. Welcome to Between the Brackets. I'm Yaron Koren, and my guest for this episode is Bartosz Dziewoński, also known as user Matma Rex. And I have to admit I'm jealous of him for having two different cool names, while some of us don't even have one. Bartosz has worked for the Wikimedia Foundation since 2014, and most of that time he's been in the editing team within the contributors group, although he was briefly in the multimedia team as well. The editing team handles a number of projects related to editing, probably the most well-known being Mediawiki's custom WYSIWYG editor called VisualEditor. So Bartosz, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
So where do you live?
I live in Poland and I work from Poland. I live in a village near Kraków.
Oh, okay. How often do you meet the people you work with, if ever?
We quite a bit of times. So usually I would say like 2 or 3 times a year. We have one meeting of like all employees of the Wikimedia Foundation, which is in San Francisco, usually around January.
Right.
And in addition to that, I'm usually at the European Hackathon.
Yeah.
So these two are pretty much the same every year. And in addition to that, I'm sometimes at Wikimedia. I've been to 2 so far. And sometimes we have some extra additional meetings, but that's not like not every year.
Right. So you've been working for the Wikimedia Foundation since 2014, but when and how did you actually get started working on Mediawiki?
I started as an editor on the Polish Wikipedia when I'm actually not sure what year it might have been, but it's something around 2010 maybe, or 2009.
Yeah.
And from that, I've graduated to the more technical things. I started working on templates. I started working on gadgets, and eventually I started working on Mediawiki itself. I think my first commits are from 2013, perhaps.
Yeah. In the last episode, I interviewed 2 of the most recent Google Summer of Code students in this summer's batch. And I'd say it's appropriate that we're talking now since you were a Google Summer of Code student yourself back in 2014, and not just any student, but the one with what I would say is almost without a doubt the most high-impact project that the Wikimedia Foundation has ever had in the Google Summer of Code. That was a project that separated out skins from core Mediawiki and made them pluggable elements more like extensions are. How did that project come about?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't really remember that many details. Like it's just something that I've used to work on skins a bunch. I didn't really create any of my own. I'm not really a designer. But I
a
worked
software
a lot
designer?
Yeah, I mean.
You're saying
exactly.
saying you're not really a graphic designer for skins, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not an interface designer. So I didn't really create any skins of my own, but I worked a bunch on the existing ones. And well, it just seemed like a lot of pain that many things in Mediawiki core were still hard coding vector and occasionally still hard coding monobook.
Right.
So yeah, that seemed like a project that was too small to actually like randomly start working on. So I tried the Google Summer of Code route. I'm glad it worked out. I hope I didn't make anyone too angry with that project, although a few people were a bit unhappy.
Yeah, well, it certainly added one more step to standard Mediawiki setup, where now you can't just you have to do that extra step or else the getting skins, and now there's other stuff in place too before you can actually do anything.
Yeah, I mean, if you use the the official downloads, it works mostly as before. But that's true. You have an extra step if setting up from Git.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm used to doing it via Git. Maybe most people don't. I'm just wondering how that project. I mean, how it was that you ended up doing that kind of major overhaul while still a student. Was it basically your idea and your initiative, or was someone else? Did someone else conceive of it and you came in to do it?
It was pretty much mine. I think at this point I had 2 years of experience working with Mediawiki, maybe a bit more than that. In addition to all the time I spent I spent just creating gadgets on the wiki.
Right.
It was definitely more technical than many of the usual Google Summer of Code projects. I actually had a hard time finding a mentor for it, even though I feel like the mentor didn't really have to do much, just kind of trust me, I guess, that I knew what I was doing.
Right. Yeah, I was wondering about that too. Whether how involved the mentors. I think you had 2 mentors actually, how involved they were in that whole process. But that makes sense that it was basically your baby. So you started working for the Wikimedia Foundation in September 2014, from what I understand, which is right after that GSOC project ended. Is that a coincidence, or did one lead to the other?
I would say that was mostly a coincidence. When I started working for the Wikimedia Foundation, I just applied for a job, and well, I had a couple interviews, and in the end, I made it.
I get it. Okay.
The project might have helped my credibility, I suppose.
Right.
But my job now and my job then isn't really very closely related to what I worked on in the Summer of Code projects.
Right. It's interesting. One of the people I interviewed before is a guy named Brian Wolf. I don't know if you know him, but
yeah, I know Brian.
Okay. He had a somewhat similar path to getting into the Wikimedia Foundation, where he started off doing gadgets and those kinds of things. I think for Wiki News in his case, and then he did a Google Summer of Code project a few years before you did. But then
he worked on the multimedia attributes?
That sounds right, yeah. I'm just wondering, do you feel like that particular avenue for getting into Mediawiki programming via doing gadgets and that kind of scripting stuff is closing off because Wikipedia and the rest are so much more built up now than they were before, and maybe more bureaucratic? Or maybe you just don't know. I mean, if it's been a while since you've looked into
I think I know
gadgets.
what I mean. I'm wondering. So I suppose that might be a little bit true for the English Wikipedia in particular. But I think the other projects are still in a state that is much friendlier to newcomers. I don't mean just in the community being friendly or not. I don't mean that. I just mean that there is still more things to be done on, say, even Polish Wikipedia, or perhaps on the English Wiki News, like Brian says. And it's a lot easier to get into it and to not just write articles, but to do technical stuff like templates, gadgets, and so on.
Yeah.
So I think that's still a perfectly possible avenue to get into working on Mediawiki.
Okay, that's good to know. So you've spent a lot of the time so far at the Wikimedia Foundation, for what I understand, working on VisualEditor in one way or another. When did you start working on that?
That's That's just the first team I was hired to work on. Like my first job position was engineer in the VisualEditor team. And I'm pretty much still here, except that the team has been renamed a couple of times, back and forth.
Right. I don't think Visual Editor has really come up before on this podcast, even though it's such a big initiative. There are obviously different aspects to it that we can talk about, from the technical to the quote-unquote political aspects, like it's how it was deployed on Wikipedia. And
that's a scary one.
The controversy around that and so forth. But and we talk about how successful it's been in terms of increasing editing. But let me first ask you this: did you ever get the feeling while working on Visual Editor that to get it working perfectly just seemed like an impossible task because of all the remaining bugs with it? And does it ever still feel that way? Which is not to just to clarify, not to denigrate Visual Editor. I'm just wondering what it's like to be on the development side of it.
So in some areas, it definitely feels like an infinite task that is never actually going to be completed. Because I mean, at some point in a perfect world, in 20 years, we would perhaps like to have some specialized editing dialogues or something for individual templates. And well, every time a new template is created, that would involve creating some at least configuration or some support code and so on for the project.
Yeah. Well, that part already exists with the template info extension.
Template data, yeah.
The template data.
Definitely, that's a lot towards that. But even with template data, there's still a lot of templates that have really incomplete information for the system. And if you look at projects outside of the English Wikipedia, the situation is even worse on most of them.
Yeah. I guess there are those two initiatives going, sort of competing with each other is standardizing or adding metadata to all the templates, and then getting rid, in some sense, of info box editing altogether with Wikidata. I don't know if those two come up as sort of conflicting goals.
I haven't really thought of that, to be honest, but I don't feel like it's a conflict. I mean, info boxes is certainly a large use case for templates, but it's definitely not the only one.
Oh,
there is a lot of simpler templates, like all of the page issue templates,
right,
and all of the random issues for like just rendering text with some funny formatting and so on.
Yeah, and citations.
That's yeah, exactly. So I feel like we will never be able to get away with doing less work towards supporting templates, if that's what you're asking.
Right. Okay, sure. Back to Visual Editor, do you know offhand of any statistics as far as usage of it at the moment? Like what % of edits on Wikipedia are done with Visual Editor?
I'm pretty sure we have them somewhere, but I don't actually remember it offhand.
Yeah, okay. No, that's fine. I don't mean to put you on the spot with this, but do you use Visual Editor for editing?
Personally, I would say it's about 50% of my edits.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I often end up doing a lot of like technical things that, when I'm editing templates, obviously I don't really get to use VisualEditor.
Right.
But I've never been writing articles a lot. Like I have like maybe 10 articles on Polish Wikipedia to my name. But VisualEditor has definitely made it easier for me to make like wiki gnome corrections.
Yeah. Speaking of features that may come to Visual Editor, real-time collaborative editing is something that people have talked about for a long time. That's the idea of having Visual Editor work like Etherpad or Google Docs, etc., where
our secret Skunkworks project.
Okay. That's very interesting. So just to clarify for people who don't know, the idea is that you can see other people's edits happening at the same time on the edit page. So, in theory, any number of people can be editing the page at the same time. So that's interesting. Is there really a secret project to get this done at the moment? Or semi-secret, I guess.
Yeah. It's not really secret. It's just something that, we are not really working on this as a priority, but it's something that we kept in mind while designing the internals of the editor. And there is a proof of concept editor that has been actually, that might have been showcased on some hackathons or possibly Wikimedia.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah,
I think we definitely have like the meat of this working. So you can open a page where you can see edits being made at the same time by other people with like viewing their cursors and so on in a similar manner to, like I said, Etherpads or Google Docs.
Yeah.
I think sorry, have a question?
Oh, no, go ahead.
I think the hardest part that is remaining to solve is how to actually integrate this with the Mediawiki's editor and with Mediawiki's concept of revision of a page.
Right.
Since that, like, every edit has just one author, and we can't really generate hundreds of edits for every time we type something, and we can't really merge edits. We can't really merge contributions by different people. So that is something we are still wondering how to solve.
Yeah, I mean, that to me seems. I've thought about that too. That to me seems like an insurmountable problem of how to allow that without basically ruining the history page by having it filled full of one character changes. Is there potentially some solution for that?
I think one solution that that people have actually considered is just displaying some separate disclaimer when you open this special collaborative editing mode, that your edits in this mode would be released in the public domain or under CC0, and at this point we don't have to worry about crediting people since it's in public domain.
Right.
That is one option we considered. And I think the other option that has been entertained is to create this collaborative editor as a separate page. And at the end, you would just get back the wiki text that you would have to paste into the old editing page.
Oh,
and then it's your problem how to credit it.
Right.
Okay. This is actually a very hard problem, and we don't really have a good solution for it yet.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. That's the second one sounds more like a hack, but it didn't. But
yeah, absolutely.
Like it work. So another big potential feature of Visual Editor, future feature, is editing from mobile devices, whether that's phones or tablets. On the editing team's webpage, that's listed as one of the main goals currently. How much of that is a technical issue versus just an interface design issue of deciding what the editing interface should look like on a small screen?
It's really both of them. We are definitely working on this for I suppose until the end of this calendar year. That is the main focus for the editing team. Mobile editing is possible right now. We have the editor deployed on the mobile side.
You have Visual Editor?
There is VisualEditor on the mobile side. it's just not a great experience right now for a couple of reasons. And yeah, one of the big reasons is that some parts of the interface were just not designed with the mobile in mind. For example, some of the pop-up dialogues, like one of the worst offenders right now is the maps dialogue, which actually just completely breaks down on mobile. It doesn't even fit on your screen.
Okay.
There are a couple of situations like this, but there are some technical problems as well, especially since mobile devices have a lot of interesting input methods, other than just a keyboard like you would usually use on desktop, and especially if you look at languages different than English, especially with different alphabets like let's say Chinese or Thai, there are just different applications that people use to input text, and some of them interact with the page in weird ways.
Yeah.
I'm not really an expert on this, so I'm speaking a bit vaguely, but it's something that folks are working on.
Yeah. Okay. And that's specific. That's more of an issue on cell phones versus a desktop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm sorry, I'm not really an expert on this. But as far as I know, there are just fewer patterns, so to speak, in which input methods work on desktops than the ways they work on mobile.
Right.
And
right.
it's just we've already mostly done the work to support the desktop ones, but we haven't really looked at the mobile ones in close detail yet.
Yeah. Okay. On mobile devices, there's a lot of potential. There's a lot more potential usage of, smart helpers to more quickly undo some vandalism or change or fix a typo, that sort of thing. I mean, that's stuff that could be useful on the desktop too, or laptops. But has there been any thought or effort about putting in wizards to make mobile editing easier?
I've heard of some projects in the past that were focused on micro contributions usually, but right. I think that nothing really has come out of it. It's not really something we have planned right now, as far as I know.
Yeah. Okay. Part of the development of VisualEditor involved creating two new generic JavaScript libraries. One is called OOJS, and the other one was originally called OOjs UI, but now just called OOUI. First of all, how do you pronounce that second library's name? The wiki page for it says it should be pronounced "we" with an exclamation mark at the end.
Oh, does it? Well, that's news to me.
Oh, okay.
I think there is a bit of a disagreement. A few people want to pronounce it's we. Personally, I just say OOUI.
Yeah, okay. That's what I've been saying too. I didn't know whether that was a mistake or not.
It's a bit funny. It's a similar problem with the OOjs library for like the AI analysis of edits, right? Some people call it OOjs, some people call it OOjs.
Oh, how's that spelled?
ORES.
Oh yeah, that one. Right.
Yeah, and well, maybe I'm pronouncing it's wrong as well. But I've heard two different pronunciations. One being OOjs and the other being OOjs.
Yeah. Yeah, having had to come up with names for a lot of different things, I know that's a key part of it.
The hardest problem in computer science.
Right. Sure. So for OOJS and OOUI, from what I understand, OOJS is a general JavaScript framework, while OOUI adds to it a Mediawiki specific look and feel. So it's sort of like the relationship between jQuery and jQueryUI. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's that's a good comparison. OOJS it just implements the concept of classes into JavaScript. It's pretty much filling in the parts of JavaScript that haven't been widely supported in browsers yet. When we started working on this,
Right.
and OOUI is the main interface library.
Yeah.
Like that's where most of the things happen. OOJS is a very small framework.
Yeah. So that gets at something I want to ask. I mean, at this point, there are dozens or more of notable JavaScript frameworks, but that wasn't really the case in 2011, which I think is when OOJS was first developed, although it wasn't released until 2013, from what I understand. If visual editor development were starting today, would it still make sense to create a new framework for it, or would you prefer to use one of the existing ones?
It's hard to answer. I haven't really thought about it much. It is possible that we would have done without OOUI if we were starting today. But on the other hand, I feel like it has some features that are not really common in the other frameworks. In particular, we've put quite a bit of an effort towards accessibility of the library, and I feel like that's something that just doesn't work out of the box with many other interface libraries you would use.
You're talking about accessibility, like things like support for not hearing impaired, visually impaired users, or that kind of thing.
Yes, that would include like screen reader support. So that's what you're saying. But also things like keyboard accessibility. Just making sure that you can interact with our widgets the way you would interact with the native widgets created by the operating system. Like being able to, like for the simplest example, being able to use arrow keys in a drop-down menu to pick up the items from them and use enter to confirm this.
Yeah.
But first,
Yeah.
And in addition to that, especially recently, we've put a lot of effort towards making the design just fit the accessibility guidelines of some when it comes to like the font sizes and colors and contrast and so on.
Right. Has there been any attempt or at least any thought in terms of popularizing these two libraries to get other people to use them and maybe help with a development effort outside of Wikimedia projects?
Yeah. So we've done like a bare minimum effort towards this. We have the source code of this mirrored to GitHub, and we have the library itself released on NPM. But it would really take a lot of marketing, I guess, to try to convince somebody else to use this. And we haven't really tried this, as far as I know.
Yeah. Speaking personally as a developer, I looked into switching my extension page forms, which is the big JavaScript using extension of mine, to use OOJS and OOUI. Sorry. There's at the moment there are just various things. I mean, right now it uses jQuery and jQueryUI. There are various things that jQueryUI has that OOUI doesn't yet support, like sortable elements and a variety of inputs like date pickers and that kind of thing. I mean, is the idea to expand OOUI out to fill all of those kinds of interface elements, or is it pretty much just whatever is needed by core Mediawiki and VisualEditor?
There isn't really a dedicated team working on just OOUI, so there is nobody just inventing widgets that we are missing and that we should probably have. So it's like you said, whenever we find out that some use case in Mediawiki or in VisualEditor needs something that isn't implemented yet, that's when we start working on it.
Yeah.
But well, as a result of this, we definitely have a smaller library of widgets compared to many other libraries.
Right.
But well, that's just a matter of how much time is spent on this library. We do have a date picker, so it's a bit complicated, but it's maintained separately in Mediawiki. But you can use a date picker that is consistent with other OOUI widgets.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting. I'll have to look into that. Yeah, it would be great to. This is very self-indulgent of me to just talk about my own extension, but it would be great to start using some of the elements just to have a more consistent look and feel with the rest of Mediawiki. And I guess anyone else who has Mediawiki extensions that add to the interface, you should look into OOUI also. So maybe I should have asked this before, but what actually is your involvement with these libraries? I mean, how much of your time do you spend now on them, and how much did you before?
A lot less time now than I used to. I was much more involved, like let's say 2 or 3 years ago, when I actually worked on the reason why we had to rename OOJS UI to OOUI. Namely, I wrote most of the PHP version of it.
Oh, okay.
So I definitely did a lot of work on it back then. And well, that was still a time when we were still creating new widgets often for, even for basic things like combo boxes, because that didn't, that had to be written at some point, and it wasn't yet, since it was still a very young library. Right now, I still do some maintenance work and some bug fixes, and I'm in a way, I guess I'm a consultant for complicated problems with the library.
Right.
But the actual development has been mostly taken over from me by other people.
Okay. So what are you working on these days?
I guess half of my time would be VisualEditor. That includes mostly the mobile improvements that we are going to be working on for the next couple of months. But also the usual bug fixes.
Right.
And the rest of the time is mostly on other things related to page editing, just to speak very widely. Because the editing team at the Wikimedia Foundation technically supports like 50 or something like that, different extensions that do things related to page editing. Things like flag drafts and proofread page and abuse filter and title blacklist, and a bunch of other things that we don't really actively work on, but somebody has to maintain them in the rare case when something in them breaks,
right? Sure.
Or when some new feature in Mediawiki requires something to be updated in them. And so, for example, something I've had to work on recently, we had TemplateStyles deployed to Wikipedias, which is great, by the way. I love it. But I had to update flagged refs to support this, so that it would serve the styles for the same revision as the content, instead of always the most recent one.
Okay, yeah. I'm actually. What is this? What is this TemplateStyles extension? I don't know if I've heard of it.
It's been deployed recently to Wikipedias. It allows you to define CSS styles for individual templates.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Such that when the template is included on the page, these styles are loaded as well. You can use this now instead of the inline style attribute, and it just allows for much more flexibility. So, for example, you can create different styles for different skins, like for desktop and mobile. And in some cases, you can just save a lot of the page size by not having to repeat the inline styles for every table cell or something like that.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty neat. And that change you talked about actually ties into the whole issue of being able to see what the page actually looked like when you go to an old revision of the page, meaning try to get the state of the templates and CSS, I guess, and everything else at that time. Is that does it tie into that? I mean, is that something that you have looked into?
Kind of. I mean, when it comes to TemplateStyles, I think that works mostly okay. It just had problems with flagged refs compatibility in particular, so flagged refs, also known as pending changes. Maybe that would be a better name for some of the listeners.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know it as flagged refs, but yeah, sure. So there's potential that after you're done with the whole mobile editing thing, that you'll just get out of the VisualEditor project entirely?
I don't have plans for that right now. I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
But I feel like there is still a lot more work to be done here.
Right. Yeah. So we've talked about various features that you've looked into or that people have asked about. Are there any other features in core Mediawiki or extensions that people have been talking about for a long time that you thought would be in place by now, but they just turned out to be a lot more difficult than they seemed at first?
I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Like, do you have some examples? So that you would like me to talk about? No?
Right. Now I realize that it is a hard question.
Collaborative editing is certainly one, and I mean I'm sure there are others.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's always the classics, like being able to install extensions from the wiki interface. I don't know if you've ever been involved in that
when it comes to Mediawiki itself, like managing configuration from the page.
Right.
That's definitely something big that's missing.
Yeah. Great. Well, I think that's all my questions. Thanks for talking.
Okay.
Yeah, it was great talking to you.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of Between the Brackets. I want to again thank my guest, Bartosz Dziewoński of the Wikimedia Foundation, and see you next time.